Welcome to the Creative Cities event series. My name is James Lee from the Tokyo Development Learning Center of the World Bank, and I am very pleased to be your moderator for today's program. Creative cities, they cover the full spectrum of cultural, artistic expression and activities from various creative industries, including tourism, which all have been hit hard by the pandemic. Yet as the world is gradually reopening to the new normal, we look to creative industries to lead the recovery, but also to boost city competitiveness. And previously, we looked at the different facets and enablers that make up creative cities. Today, we will explore these key concepts of a creative city through the experience of Kyoto. In this context, we have gathered practitioners and creators to share their experiences and key insights that we have published from our recently minted report called the Kyoto Creative City Report. This report builds on the findings of a 5-day workshop that TDLC has organized in partnership with UNESCO and also the city of Kyoto in January of 2020. And we will get into these insights very shortly. Before we get started, a few housekeeping announcements from me. So first off, this webinar will be conducted in English, but we do offer simultaneous English to Japanese interpretation. So for those who wish to listen to the seminar in Japanese, please click on the interpretation icon at the bottom. This is the globe icon. So where you can select Japanese option if you like to listen to in Japanese. And for English speakers, please select the English option. And let me give you just a second to get that set up. While you're setting up, throughout the session, please feel free to drop any questions or comments to our speakers into the chat space. We will have a short Q&A at the end of the program where you can post any questions in English or Japanese, and our TDLC chat master will address these questions by getting them to our speakers. And lastly, this event will be recorded, and the recording will be made available on our TDLC website for in case you miss any content or like to share this amongst your networks. So I think we are now ready to get started. And at this time, I would like to invite Mr. Tsuchihashi, who is the Chief Tourism Officer from the Kyoto City office, to deliver the opening remarks. So Tsuchihashi-san, I see you on camera and I see that you're ready. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I am Tsuchihashi, the Chief Tourism Officer of Kyoto City. I would like to congratulate on the publication and this event being held with the participation of many people, and also express my thanks and congratulations on this publication of Creative City Kyoto. And I would like to express my deepest respect for the efforts of the World Bank in organizing this event. Now, Kyoto City has a population of more than 1.4 million, and it is one of the historical cities, few cities in the world where the function and culture of the city have never been disrupted for more than 1,000 years. But on the other hand, it is also a resilient city that has experienced and overcome various crises such as wars and disasters many times in history. I would like to introduce one symbolic example. About 150 years ago, Kyoto virtually lost its status as the capital, and its population plummeted to 1/3 of its original size. At that time, the local people, with the belief that urban development starts with the human resources development and local children should be raised by the local community, started to build an elementary school for their children with their own money. This was an epoch-making event, as it was before government established elementary schools, and it became a driving force for the reconstruction of Kyoto. In addition, part of the former sites of those elementary schools have now been reborn as the city's center for business founding and innovation. And we believe that the idea of the local people at the time have been passed down to the present day and will give birth to startup companies that will have an impact on the world and lead to the further revitalization of the region. I believe this power of the citizens and the power of the local community is the secret to Kyoto's ability to be a creative city. Kyoto's economy, and especially Kyoto tourism, has suffered an unprecedentedly serious blow due to the impact of COVID-19 that has been wreaking havoc around the world since 2020. Tourism is a core industry that supports a wide range of Kyoto's economy and employment, including the accommodations and restaurant industries, and it plays an important role in the inheritance and development of Kyoto's important culture and in the maintenance of the local communities that are responsible for that inheritance and development. After experiencing COVID-19 pandemic, I have come to realize again that tourism has been supporting Kyoto in various aspects. Now is the time to demonstrate the resilience that Kyoto has cultivated so far and to make a strong recovery of tourism in Kyoto from the pandemic. However, in order to make a recovery from the pandemic, there is one important thing to remember. Before the pandemic, Kyoto was facing several tourism issues such as congestions in some sightseeing spots and public transportation and bad manners due to the rapid increase in inbound tourism. In order to avoid returning to such a state, the city has been working on the basic premise of harmonizing the lives of citizens and tourism to ensure the development of sustainable tourism, which will contribute to the inheritance and development of local culture and communities. And we believe it will be important for the future city building of Kyoto. Under the circumstances, in November last year, the Kyoto City formulated the Kyoto Tourism Moral Code of Conduct, which is a code of conduct for tourism businesses, workers, tourists, and citizens to respect each other, unite their thoughts, and pass on the irreplaceable Kyoto to the future. In the event of a crisis in Kyoto, all stakeholders can work together to overcome it. We're proud that this is one of the Kyoto's great strengths. In the Kyoto Tourism Promotion Plan 2025, formulated in March of this year, we have included the phrase, Kyoto, a city that transforms history and culture into hope. Kyoto's irreplaceable history and culture, attracting people from all over the world, will be turned into power and hope for the people living in the future. By protecting, nurturing, and utilizing history and culture, all of us in Kyoto together will open up the future. This is what was meant to convey. It will contribute to solving various social issues such as economic disparity and climate change and to the achievement of SDGs. We believe that this is the responsibility of Kyoto as an international city of culture and tourism and a creative city. Last but not least, through this event, we hope that this will help the history, culture, and creativity that Kyoto has cultivated be disseminated to the world and help you deepen your insights. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Tsuchihashi-san, for your welcome remarks and for your very interesting anecdote about Kyoto City. So now let's get down to the meat of our program today. And at this time, I would like to invite my colleagues, Victor Mulas, Senior Urban Specialist and Team Lead of TDLC, and Haruka, Operation Officer at TDLC, to kind of guide you through Kyoto City along with its rich history and evolution of Kyoto as a creative city. So Victor and Haruka, over to you.
Thank you, James. So we're going to talk about Kyoto as a case of creative cities. and how the city has been leveraging the creative talent and creativity to transform the city's neighborhoods. But let me start with a little bit of a framework and a little bit of background of creative cities. What is this concept and why do we talk about it? So what we have seen recently, it has been a constant wave of transformation. We are feeling that in our lives, in the way we work, and it's because of new technologies and digitalization, which are affecting every aspect of our lives. In fact, it's affecting also the structure of the economy. And when we look at future jobs and future opportunities for industries to grow, creativity and innovations are key skills for that. So these are a fact that we have been seeing recently, but with COVID-19, we have been seeing this trend accelerating. And creativity and innovation will be at the core of what is the future of the recovery and the new development. So let's start looking a little bit at what are the creative industries and what is the impact that can bring to cities. So the first thing we look at is economic growth. Then we look at urban transformation and social inclusion. And these are the main three effects we saw creative talent and creative industries can do in cities. Now, the interesting thing is that agglomeration effects are attracting this creative talent and innovation to cities. They are clustering around that. So why economic growth? Well, creative industries represent about 6% of the global economy and actually support much more if you look at indirect effects and how digitalizations are increasing their impact across different sectors of the economy. In terms of urban transformation, we are seeing this clustering of creative talent going to cities and concentrating in them, and actually concentrating within cities to generate hubs and clusters that tend to go into revitalizing neglected previous areas. And that happens because there is a close link between new innovation activities like startups, as our opening remarks speaker talk about, and also artistic talent and creativity. And that makes it starting to happen more and more. So the trends that we used to see from artists and creativity revitalizing depressed, deteriorated urban spaces and areas, it's merging and accelerating in cities. And finally, we are seeing creativity and creative talent and industries as a potential force for social inclusion. And that is because it can restore the social fabric and reskill the local residents. But most importantly, when you introduce the art part and the cultural heritage and creativity, it also empowers marginalized groups. It has that potential, and it can look into encouraging the feelings of belonging and forming communities. Now, how do we bring that into cities? How do we put it into practice? Well, the World Bank, we think a lot about frameworks. And in this case, we work together with UNESCO, and together we develop a framework of how to think about how do we leverage creative talent and creative industries into generating these impacts in cities. Now, this figure here gives you the framework. This is in a separate publication. You have the link at the bottom of the slides. And it seems very complicated, but let me just try to simplify it for you. Basically, we are looking at the outcomes, which are the external circles that you see. The urban transformation and special benefits, the economic benefits and local economic development, or the social inclusion benefits, right? And what we have is the main circle at the center. We all have in every city assets and resources that can be creative, artists, creative capital, and intangible cultural heritage. Now, how do we transform them into the outcomes? That is what we call the enablers. And you can see a series of enablers. There are 6 here. You have more interest, you can go into the details in that study that I referred to, which is the link is in this slide. And what we are gonna do now is to apply this framework to Kyoto as a case of creative city. And we're gonna focus primarily on the first 3 enablers: urban infrastructure and livability, skills and innovation, and networks. But we will never forget about the other 3, particularly uniqueness, the institutions, and the digital environment. Now, my colleague Haruka is going to take us to Kyoto and give us the initial background of the city.
Thank you so much, Victor. So I know today we have a lot of participants calling in from Kyoto, proper Kyoto, but also from Tokyo and even other part of the country. So thank you so much for your participation. Now let's dive into the Kyoto as if we are all traveling to the city. So how transformation of Kyoto happened as a creative neighborhood. We know Kyoto more as the center for tourism, a lot of shrines and temples, dozens of World UNESCO World Heritage, and they're also famous for traditional industries. Not too many people have really thought and tried to connect the dots between these traditional industries and creative assets and digital economy, but that has been happening since 1990s. And this trend is very much in a global trend as we are seeing in New York, London, Barcelona, or even in Berlin. So in terms of the Kyoto, we see this the first wave of urban model technology ecosystem that has started in the district of business district, very close to Higashiyama and Gion historical area. And then we also see a lot of co-working spaces happening in this area. The first wave of this creative neighborhood occurred more toward the north of the area, which we are focusing on this actual research, which is a little bit in the south, closer to Kyoto Station. So what happened between the first wave of when digital business has begun to emerge in the central business district in the 1990s and 2000, and what is the new wave of creative community formed around Kyoto Station? Let's dive into it and let's see what the city has done. Many people might have think that this creative neighborhood and community creation is something that's very much private driven, which is very much a very important actor. But in case of Kyoto, we see that the city themselves has also played a very critical role, and they also provided dozens of policies to support this creative neighborhood catalyzation. Let me give you three elements. First element is that the city has focused on preserving creative and cultural capital. They try to enable and foster development of creative talent in the community. So this is like a basic first approach. What's so unique about Kyoto, and this is also very prominent across Japan, is the city also tried to catalyze urban revitalization at the neighborhood level. They try to attract the creative community through accessibility, livability, or new amenities improvement on the district level. And there are these policies that you can see and you can review later on. Finally, the city also tried to boost catalyzers. So they're not only focusing on urban infrastructure and development, they are very much keen on how to catalyze and also bring different actors. So the city can really bloom in full as a startup and also creative community ecosystem. In case you are urban planner, I'm sure this kind of map would excite you. So basically, we are trying to show you the area we are focusing in our case study, which we called as East area and West area of Kyoto Station. The two areas are very unique, and Victor and I would explain later more in detail. But essentially, both of these areas, the government has policies to catalyze and also had a future vision so that this area would make sure to cluster creative community and also bloom as a creative neighborhood. Now, let me pass the slide and explanation to Victor again.
Thank you. So Haruka has kindly introduced the concept of catalyzer when she was talking about Kyoto policy. So what are the catalyzers? So when we look at urban transformation, the city has a very important role, as Haruka has highlighted. It has to build the enabling environment, the livable environment, and also try to gather the momentum and create the conditions for these creative communities to start appearing. But that's not enough. We also need some triggers to that community. And what we have seen is that those triggers usually are generated by this, what we call creative spaces. What are these creative spaces? Well, it goes from a cafe to a co-working space, to a place where there are workshops and communities are built. In essence, anything that builds a community of creative talent. And what we have done in this case is we dig into the different types of these creative spaces and their impact in generating creative communities that will transform ultimately the neighborhood. So there are three main roles that we identify. The first one is catalyzer, then we have amplifier and contributor. In order of importance, catalyzer is the more important because it's the one that influences more people. It's the one that is the trendsetter, the driver of the creative economy. Basically, is the one that is setting and building the community. Usually it's the place to be in if you want to meet someone, the place that has the most interesting workshops, and the place that contributes more into generating that community. In fact, they think building the community is one of the most important roles they have. Then we have the amplifiers, which as their name shows, it's basically amplifying the effect of the catalyzer, amplifying the community. Now, the important thing of the amplifiers is that they usually link very well the local traditions and cultures of the place, the uniqueness of the place, and the creative intangible creative capital together. So basically, they bring the local assets and creativity together with the new communities and creative communities. And we're going to see an example of this so it's more clear for you. And finally, we have the contributors, which are the ones that add to the critical mass and collectively has a large influence when you develop a lot of them. So let's dig into these roles when we go into the neighborhoods. We're going to start first on the in the east neighborhood. I'm going to go through that one, and then Haruka is going to take us to the west. So if we can go back one, before we move, I want to stop in this visual for a bit. For those of you that have not traveled to Kyoto or are not familiar with Kyoto, the east neighborhood that was shown before, it used to be a neighborhood that was depressed, but it has a lot of Machiya and old houses. And for those of you that are not familiar with Machiya, it's the traditional houses of Kyoto. And it looks very much like this. You have a lot of this, so it's very appealing, but it used to be a depressed area, and it used to be an informal red district, so it was not very, very safe. However, it had very interesting environment, an attractive environment, and it's very well connected too because it's next to the station. So let's dig into the East neighborhood transformation. So what we see here is kind of the timeline of what happened and how these creative spaces starting developing the community. And very interesting things happen here. First one is we start seeing some of the first cameras appearing in 2004 and 2009, but there's not too many. Those are like, we'll call the beachhead, people that are just saying, okay, this looks good, but nobody knows, and they are just building small pockets of community. Now, interestingly enough, what you are seeing here is also these spaces in the early years were more at the north of the neighborhood, which is closer to other areas in Kyoto that are more developed, that had more creative talent and were closer to the business district, right? So what you are seeing here is also a movement in time, but together a movement to the south. And that's very interesting because it's like the creative talent starts to develop the neighborhood and it goes from north to south. Now, the other thing you see is there is an effect of critical mass. There is a moment that is very little, and it goes very similar to the exponential curve. It goes very little and then suddenly explodes harder, right? And that's because they are building social networks and these communities. Once they create these social networks, everything takes a very accelerated pace. Now, the critical moment started around 2009, when you see also the startup movement happening in Kyoto. And then it went into 2014. So there are kind of 2 weeks, but in 2014, it gets accelerated. And then with the entrance of the catalyzer, like Fag Cafe, everything accelerates much more. Okay, so we can now go and see this spatially. As I was saying, there is a movement from north to south, and the main catalyzer is Fag Cafe. And as you can see, there is also a concentration of the community around Fag Cafe. And that's where all the other spaces get around, right? So it seems there is a big concentration and it's starting to go from north to south. Now, the government intervention, the largest one is really, really at the south. You see down there, the Kyoto City University that is gonna come now. So that is gonna connect the whole neighborhood that started from the north to Kyoto Station and maybe go to the south afterwards. But that's the complete transformation. Now, the intervention of the government is driving even more these creative neighborhoods and going into that. So let's see visually how these spaces look like, right? So as I said, the main catalyzer in this area is Fat Cafe Kyoto. You can see how it looks like. But basically, this is a space that develops a lot of workshops, that builds its own community, and is the place to be if you want to meet someone in the creative talent industry or connect to technology and startups too. It's also a fat cafe, so it has fabrication instruments and anything related to other kind of industries like textiles or arts. We're gonna know more about that in the next section. Akeji Roji is the amplifier, and why do we point out to this one is because, as you can see, those are machillas. And Akeji Roji is basically a residence for artists, traditional artists. And it's kind of an incubation for artists that can be there until they start developing themselves. But it builds cohorts of very core artists. Now, finally, and a contributor for you to see is Walden Goods Cafe. And you can see how it looks like. This is a very trendy cafe. It attracts a lot of creative talent and young people that want to connect with others. It is built in a way that there is no furniture. So the interaction of people is more dynamic, but it builds the traditions of Kyoto together with the new talent. And you can see the people that are there with kimonos and without kimonos and going on in that. So let's see what is the impact. So what we saw is all this is translated into economic impact. And the analysis that we did was more related to rents as a proxy of economic development. But you can see how the rents increase over time as the creative community come into play. And it is not the most expensive area in Kyoto, but it's growing at the same rate as the most dynamic area in Kyoto, which is the CBD, which is the Central Business District. So compared to the city average, you see a big difference, but the important thing is the trend and how is it started to increase. Now, Haruka is going to take us to the West neighborhood.
Thank you, Victor. So a very similar kind of pattern. One difference between East and West is that West is still at the early stage. So East is almost like a big brother, where the West is still at the baby, step. Many local knows this West neighborhood more from the market. Also some transformation on public space, such as new JR Umekoji Kyoto Nishi Station Park. So it used to be dockyard, now it's transformed to the park. So these are public facilities and renovations. And we are also seeing the cluster of different creative communities and spaces. We see the difference between East and West is that for the West, the catalyzer, which is Kyoto Makers Garage, opened up, and then it started bringing different amplifiers and contributors. I'm not going to go too much in detail on this slide, and I would like to show a few slides with the photos, so you would have the flavor of what the West would offer. Here is the Kyoto Makers Garage, which we labeled as catalyzer, and we will have a speaker, Makino-san, right after this session. We also have an amplifier, Kagan Hotel. It's a artist residence hotel, open for both domestic and international artists. And you will see it's really trying to regenerate that area. Now, we would like to wrap up this slide and presentation with the insights to practitioners. Going back to the very original first slide, there are diverse lessons for practitioners. First, key success factor for Creative City initiative is local economic development. How can the city and also actors can preserve the capital, the cultural capital, and then expand and then make a community? Second, how can this agenda can transform urban regeneration at the neighborhood and district level? Finally, can they do this in a very social inclusive way, especially in this COVID pandemic world where people need to really feel a belongingness? Now I'd like to pass the microphone to Victor to wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you, Haruka. So what can we learn from Kyoto's successful experience? So there are some actions that we summarize, and you can see more details in the report, but these are the key areas that we saw that can help other urban practitioners to leverage what Kyoto experience was. The first one that the city did was safeguarding the local environment. It played a key role to be the guardian of the uniqueness of Japan, maintaining the cultural heritage, maintaining those machillas that we talk about, that flavor that when you go to Kyoto, you see all around, that you feel you are back into the old times. That's something that the city takes to heart and continues doing. And that brings the environment. The second thing the city is start looking for creative embryos. It start looking at different neighborhoods and I start saying, okay, these are possibilities that these areas can be regenerated and maybe leverage more the creativity that Kyoto has. And they didn't know exactly what these areas would be. They went to many of them. It was kind of a shotgun strategy, going to many of them at the same time. But then they started improving livability in these neighborhoods. And as they started improving livability of these neighborhoods, some of them started activating. The fourth action is they started to look at developing larger urban regeneration projects in those neighborhoods that had more potential. And that's what we saw in the Kyoto University one. That is still under development, but because this project takes a lot of time, the creative community kind of developed in the meantime. Now, when they did that, the interesting thing is they did it with action 5 and 6 at the same time. It was very important that Kyoto always engaged local residents in the transformation process. So there is a buy-in of the local residents and they become part of the creative community and the larger transformation of the neighborhood. And Kyoto also did that, providing a specific support in a strategic way to catalyze it, to some of them, to help the areas regenerate and move them more into the creative potential that they had. Now, we give you an overview of what Kyoto case is and what was the experience of it as a creative city, how we work in these two specific neighborhoods. And of course, this is just a pocket of all the activities that Kyoto has done. But we hope this is useful for you. One of the interesting things that we see constantly in Kyoto is this bringing the old traditions with the new and with the new talent and creativity, and how is it starting to mix with technology, startup, and innovation, creative talent, with the core assets of this tradition, and how we can live together. So this is a great example of how do we think about transforming cities after COVID-19, going into the new normal. How can we help getting our cities to be more livable, more sustainable, more green, and leveraging the internal assets that we have, and at the end, creating a better environment for all of us. So we finish just by giving you the reference of the case study if you want to go and look into more details. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Victor and Haruka. I feel like that was a really very comprehensive overview, and just looking at the pictures really brings back some good memories of Kyoto, and I want to revisit when I can. So now I would like to close this kind of presentation segment of our program today. And now we'll be moving to the panel discussion where we will be speaking with the local creators who are really driving the creative community in Kyoto. And at this point, I would like to invite Mitsuhiro Suwa, who is the co-founder and president of Loftworks. And Suwa-san has over 20 years of experience working with creators, designers, and artists. And I would also like to invite Mr. Darimasa Makino, the co-founder and CEO of Monozukuri Ventures, who also has a very extensive experience working in venture capital, but working with the startups and also creators in this space. And I would like to invite back Victor to be the moderator for these conversations. So Victor, back to you.
Thank you, James. So let me start by thanking Suwa-san and Makino-san for being part of this event. So we saw in the previous presentation, we talked about catalyzers as being two of the, one of the main driving forces of changing and transforming neighborhoods. And actually, Fab Cafe, which Suwa-san leads, was critical in transforming this neighborhood. And then Kyoto Makers Garage, which is part of Makino-san's ventures, it's also critical in the West. So we're very lucky to have both of them here, and they agreed to be here and share with us their experience. So why don't we start with a little bit of an overview of each of these spaces. So let me start first with Suwa-san. You can provide us an overview of Fab Cafe for the audience, and then we can continue with the dialogue. Thank you.
Hi, this is Mitsuwa. I want to introduce with my slide. Hi, and I'm running not only Fab Cafe, but on Lofork, the parent company of Fab Cafe. And first, please watch this movie first.
Orphe is a smart shoes system for artists and performers.
This shoes is
Sole of each shoe
very
contains
cool.
almost 100 serially controlled
And this is
cutting-edge
kind of
motion sensors,
smart
a
shoes
Bluetooth
and
console, and an
controlled
ARM
by
Cortex
apps.
M3 processor.
And it's not all,
Finding a
it's
way to make
for
shoes that have
mainly
batteries
it's
and a host of
performers
electronic
and the
components
dancers.
inside them has been very challenging.
This is the
Through
first
close
version,
collaboration,
and this is the second version of them. And they made an SDK, and they made an iPhone's app and an Android apps. Yes, and this is different brand. It's a much bigger shoes maker, not as Nike and Adidas, but a middle class of shoes company, and it's famous in Japan. And I think you may know the name, brand name Onitsuka or Asics. And this is the new brand line of Asics. The smart shoes. And connected with an iPhone. And now you will find the name Orphe, Core, and Everride Orphe, and you can buy by internet. And this is the apps. And that means Asics, they invested to that Orphe startups. And that startups, it's 7 years before, we had a hackathon with Yamaha. It's famous for piano or other sound elements. Like this hackathon, the theme is, of course, it's the sounds. And this is the moment that Orphe started. Yeah, it's a very, very prototype and primitive prototype. But it's the moment that Orphe started. And he's the founder. And the write down the image, he's very young. Yeah. And Fab Cafe, about Fab Cafe. We have 12 Fab Cafe in the world. 4 in Japan and others in mainly Japan, and 2 in France and Barcelona and Mexico. And our main tagline is community first, and not only Fab Cafe, but me too. We have many type of community inside of Fab Cafe, and this is material. And look at this glass. It's very nice glass, but it's made by rubber, and this is a maker and very classic and old style and rubber and silicone company. And we had a crowdfunding site with them, and it's very succeeded. And so this glass is made by rubber, means very soft. So baby can handle this, and you can bring it to the outside of camp. And yeah, that means rubber and silicone is a very kind of old traditional manufacturing. I think I'm sure every in the world, every country has similar old style factory and companies, but they collaborated with young, good designers And now this is their new business and new big business chance. And this is other community of
変われない
VR
け
and
ど
AR.
あるみたいな距離感覚とかありえないかもしれないもの
リアルな作品とかを持つ意味
And we have worked
自分がやりたいものが
about 3 years
バーチャルなの
already.
かアクチュアルなのか AR とか XR
More than
使った方が
400
強く自分の
designers
表現
and
したいもの
creators
が
joined
バ
to
ラン
this
スいける
community of VR and AR.
世界の作り方からどう脱却するかみたいな。
ものを
And this is a smell of community of smell like this. And we collaborate with Bangkok. And do you know Yadom is an this type of products? Maybe you may know. Yeah. And one company in Bangkok, they wanted to export to Japan and Yadom. And we have projects with them and a Fab Cafe Bangkok for new experience in UX of Yadom. And this is different story. It's first in Hida. And we have Fab Cafe Hida. It's very countryside in Japan. It's 95% is forest. And the train is only 6,000 people per day. That means it's on 50 seconds of Shinjuku station, one of the biggest station in Japan. And city government invested with us. The issue is forestry. And, you know, in Japan, many forestry and people are getting old. Average is maybe 75 years old. And we focused the architects, and many architects in the world wants to use wood more. So we made Fab Cafe Hida here with Woodcraft Studio. And we gathered architects in here, and we made a community of architects in Hida. Then the business is growing, and one of these product is this cat house. It's very 100 million yen means 10 million and 10,000 US dollars. And yeah, many young architects came to Hida, and this is from New York. And we made a good community with them. So this forest issue was not 100% solved, but somehow we make a new, for this forest issue with architects community, we make something answer. So community and cities and relationships is our main topics. And now we are making in Mexico City and Hanoi and Fuji, next Fab Cafe. And especially Fuji is this view. And when we have all textile companies here. So we will have these textile art festival in this December. So please visit to Fuji. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Suwa-san, for bringing so much diverse view. How do you build different communities, and how are you doing that in different places? Hoping taking the experience from Kyoto and Tokyo and all other places. So that was very enriched view of what Fab Cafe does as a catalyzer and how it has different impacts wherever you place it and develop the communities. Now I would like to pass the floor to Makino-san, so he can also provide us an overview of his ventures, and particularly Kyoto Makers Garage, and what was the impact and how they operate. So Makino-san, the floor is yours.
Hi, hello everyone. So I'm Makino, the co-founder and CEO and Monozukuri Ventures. So Monozukuri Venture and our mission and vision is we make hardware startup together. Why we started Monozukuri Ventures? So as you know, most of the hardware startup company have several problems. And one of the big problem is manufacturing. And we want to support and the manufacturing for the startup company. And also we can invest money to the startup company. So Monozukuri Venture is a venture capital that support hardware startup company. And we have two service, the business service, and so one of them and financial support. We are the venture capital, so we invest money to the startup company. We support and exit, and in some cases IPO and M&A. Anyway, we support the business development for the startup company. And so another service is the technical support. So this is a very unique point compared with the other venture capital. Most of the venture capital focus on the service and the internet and of course and invest money. But the startup company we supported is the most of the hardware startup company. They need several the manufacturing support. It is why we have several technical team inside, and they used to work in the Sharp and the Omron and the Minolta. They have a special background, the skill of the manufacturing. They can support and for the hardware startup company. And this is our unique point, the technical support. Of course, the small lot production, the hub space and the mass production. So we can meet the expectation for the startup company. And today, and we focus on hub space. This is a Kyoto Makers Garage, and as an introduction. And the Kyoto Makers Garage in the pub space for all the people. So we have several pub space and 3D printer and laser cutter. Everybody can use this machine. I show you several. I show you the movie. Yes. Okay. The Kyoto Makers Garage in the pub space. So where is the Kyoto Makers Garage? This is the place of the Kyoto Makers Garage, and of course, and already explained, Kyoto Makers Garage in the west of the Kyoto, near the Kyoto station. So it's called the Umekoji area, and we are the Kyoto Makers Garage is in the Umekoji area. The Umekoji area is a very unique area. The Umekoji area, the Kyoto Center, the wholesale market is existed, and it's still working. But the several and the volume of the sales is a little bit decline. Several of the wholesale company was closed and the shut down. And it is why there are a lot of the empty garage space in this area. The Kyoto Makers Garage is the before seaweed the garage. We renovated this seaweed garage to the pub space. And anyway, a lot of the empty garage in this area. It is why the west of the Umekoji area is a very new area for the Kyoto. And this is a creative technology and a lot of the area. And so we focus on the technology and the food and art. And we try to build the creative creative area in this area. I introduced several spot. One of them in the Kagan Hotel. So this is the artist hotel. The many artists in the use the space and for the creative space. And of course in the hotel, the many people that can stay in this hotel. And the the basement area in the gallery space, and everybody can see the art and the craft and the product for the artist and make it. The next is a barbecue court. This is a food court. This is before in the garage space, of course. And but a few years ago, and shut down closed, and this is the owner, new owner, and renovate to the garage to the barbecue court in a very open space, and everybody can use this as a space for the food. And the KRP is the huge and the science park, the more than the 500 and for the company that use this space. And this is a small town, small and innovation town. And we close to the Kyoto Research Park, and we can collaborate and these people and many people. And anyway, and we started a new building in the Monozukuri building. This is and the target in the startup company in the small and the middle enterprise. And the first place in the DMG Mori in they provide the metal 3D printer and the 5-axis CNC. And everybody can use this machine for the very cheap the price. And this is a working space in the craftsman and the small and middle enterprise company and join the community. And of course, the Monozukuri venture, the place in this space. And anyway, and we make us creative the area, in the Umekoji area. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Makino-san. And that was a great overview from where you started with the space, their overall role that goes beyond being a space, also as venture capital, and how do you connect with the startups. But then how you are helping development of the neighborhood, and a neighborhood that is very industrial, it has a market, but it's very interesting your point of view of bringing food and art. We are probably going to questions at this stage. So I would like our chat master, James, moderator, to let us know if there are questions for Suga-san or Makino-san, or in this case, any broader questions that they may have. In the meantime, let me just ask a brief question for Suga-san and Makino-san, because one very interesting theme from both of your presentations, beyond seeing these vibrant pictures of different communities that you build, is you both emphasize very much how do you end up creating startups, right? So this is not just to make a party or having fun with just events. This is a final goal that you are having, and you are connecting startups together with traditional companies in some cases, and building the new industries and the new products. So can you give me a sense of how do you see, very briefly, this kind of model in cities? How do you see it evolving? Because Suga-san, you presented that going to many different cities and different ones. So let me start with you. In like 2 minutes, how do you see this trend evolving? What is next?
I introduced many Fab Cafe in many cities, but I want to talk about Fab Cafe Kyoto, especially. And in Kyoto, 100 years is not a long period, and there are over 1,000 companies here. I hear Kyoto that have been in business for more than 100 years, and some of them are longer than 1,000 years. It's crazy. And so I made Fab Cafe and Lower about 13 years before. That means we're very new and newcomer and kind of an alien. So we choose not the popular area, but we choose Gojo area. There are few restaurants and people here, and until 15 years ago, local gang, Yakuza, had an office nearby. It's gone already, but yeah. So now we have many, you introduce good cafe and atmosphere, and now new designers and creators has office around us, and new hostel and new culture came. So I think it's very important point how to choose the point. There's a new area, and I had a similar experience, and I founded Loport. It's a parent company of Fab Cafe. 21 years before in Manhattan, not Manhattan, in New York, Dumbo area. It's an artificial made Soho. They gathered artists and designers. It's a very rough area, and gradually the culture came and people gathered. So how to make a new vibe and culture is you can use designers and creators.
Sorry, we don't hear the studio, by the way.
Thank you so much, Suba-san, and thank you very much for connecting directly with your Kyoto experience. I'm gonna just turn very briefly to Makino-san also. What is next for you? What do you see next for Kyoto and the neighborhoods, given your experience driving the process and trying to bring also the food and arts together?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we just tried to build the new community in the Umekoji area. The one, the technology and the monozukuri, and second, art, and so the third, the food. And overall, how to involve the technology startup company to the Umekoji area. And because we invested in the startup company, not only Japan, so also and the US and the foreign startup company. And we can have a similar connection with the other and the country startup company. So we can involve the technology and the startup company people to the Umekoji area. And so we try to make a new happen in the Umekoji area.
Thank you, Makino-san. So we see quite a few questions that's coming through in the chat bar. Thank you so much for asking your questions, both in English and Japanese. I can start picking a few, and then maybe all the panelists can also do the same. I will try to answer one question about gender. So there was a question from Mr. I hope I pronounce your name. He's Cosgrove on gender. What are the Kyoto's and local community actor explicit actions to increase the role of women in urban policy making, economic participation, leadership? I'm not reading this question because I'm a woman, but basically one thing which was interesting in the research is that a lot of these community spaces, such as Ajikiroji, which we introduced, or a box and needle, which we didn't introduce, but you can take a look in the report. These are women entrepreneurs who are doing a lot of the projects at the community level. And so maybe this is the really interesting thing. Urban planning in general in Kyoto City, we also met with both men and women. So I hope that also answered your question. Perhaps we can invite the rest of the speakers. And maybe James, would you like to pick one question specifically to Victor so he can answer? Thank you.
Sure. Yes, so great to see so many questions, so please keep them coming. One question, maybe I'll start with Victor, is how can creative communities work in making sort of local communities more sustainable and inclusive? I think maybe in terms of Kyoto, I think maybe the locals kind of suffered before with tourism, but maybe how do kind of decreasing communities also can benefit with arrival of creative communities in these neighborhoods.
Thank you very much, James. But I'm going to turn that question to Suba-san or Makino-san, whoever wants to pick it, because they are the professionals of creating communities. So how do they make it inclusive? And I know they have done it, so they have the answer, and it's practical. So Makino-san, do you want to start answering this question, and then we can let Suba-san take it too?
Yeah, very difficult question for me. And anyway, and so I think in the so I think in the so we have to the so commitment to the so the local area, because so if the so the tourists don't come to Kyoto, but so anyway, and so the existing so the people in Kyoto in the so the stay there, stay here. And it is wonder how to so make a community in the so the with the so the local people, local the so the local the members. And this is the core. And if we can make so this a core, and so the if the so the tourists and so come to the Kyoto, so we can make so new things with them. And this is my answer.
Thank you very much. And Suwa-san, do you want to also take a one?
You know, how to maintain community isn't goal, isn't how to make an innovation and new startups. But of course, an innovation can be born from a new technology and great founders and team. But however, many people, and including myself, have not been granted such a great amounts of talent. And so I advise, listen, community first. There are many people who wants to improve the future and start something new. How should we start? And so I advise, why don't you come to Fab Cafe, and why don't you start holding a small event? And there are creative people here and who will support you, and we'll have engineers as well as designers. There are senior entrepreneurs as well. So when you repeat events 2 or 3 times, a community is born. So that's the pattern. And if you have a community, next you will have the goal or visions. And sometimes it became startups. So it's let's start from small point and then like an event.
Yeah, thank you so much to both of you. I think it's fantastic, and it's what happens in action. And I have to say, when I visit both of your spaces, and you didn't know me and nobody knew me in the space, my first impression is there's a lot of different people here, and it's super active and very diverse, actually, and going from all kind of people, from artists doing very hardwork things to maybe some more technical ones, or just people, normal people that wanted to be there having a cafe or staying with the rest. And you felt very included, and those are the kind of things that you built. So I want just to pass the floor to James, if there is any other questions for our speakers here.
Yes, yes, it's a lot of questions. Let me try to kind of summarize it into one big question. One of the interests, I think, is hearing kind of Fab Cafe having different locations in different cities. Is creative city model can it be replicated in other places? And is that something, a goal that a city should have? Because we know places in Kyoto or in Japan where population is decreasing, creative cities solves a problem, right? So I think maybe we want to know the role of kind of creative cities in that sense. So maybe, I don't know, Suwa-san, do you want to take this question first?
Okay. About COVID, Fab Cafe community suffered, but you know, now we are watching Zoom and we are using YouTube. So we can easily discuss urban problems while connecting Barcelona, Kyoto, Mexico City, and Bangkok now. And compare before COVID and after COVID and now is now the real community suffered, but at the same time, our connection is much stronger than before. And we can discuss easily one topic, and for example, garbage problem of city, or next sustainability of in the world, for example. So it's a new trend, and our connection and the community is working well than before.
Thank you. Makino-san, any comments from you?
Yeah, and I think in the the feature of the umekoji in the umekoji is the creative area. And I think in the one of the feature is it's very young people that come to here because of many and artists and the creator and the company. And second point in the very foreign and diversity. And third point in the very the age and very wide. And I think in the diversity is very important. How to make us diversity the atmosphere? It is the atmosphere in the might be the creative area, creative town. This is my opinion.
Thank you very much. I feel like we have so many other questions that are unanswered, but I'm afraid that we are already 6-7 minutes beyond time. So maybe I can wrap up this program today. So I want to give a big thank you to Suwa-san and Makino-san and Victor and also Haruka for your presentation and for sharing your insights on this highly enriching conversation. I trust that our audience have also found it to be insightful and valuable. So thank you, and big thank you to our participants for joining us today. This was episode 2 of our Creative Cities event series, so please stay tuned for round 3. TDLC also organizes talks on a range of different urban topics. So if you're looking to learn more, do check out our website or our SNS channels via Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, where you can find some of these videos and recordings of our previous webinars. So thank you again to everyone for your time, and we highly look forward to having you back for the next one. So thank you very much, and good evening to whoever is joining from Tokyo. Thank you.